Hello and welcome to the sideboard here at SCG Richmond. My name is Ruben Bressler and I am joined by Drew Levin. Drew was in the top 4 of the Saturday tournament, the team sealed event with Jason Ford and Jarvis Yu, and you are currently undefeated with a very interesting take on mono red that people might not have seen coming, but certainly will now if they ever have to play against this. So tell me a little bit about the genesis of this deck.
So this is a Young Pyromancer-inspired deck that had a lot of elements already in existence with a very aggressive Krenko's Command deck that popped up a bit before M14 came out, and Young Pyromancer is really the card that puts it over the top.
Sure, so you have Young Pyromancer and Krenko's Command as your 2 token generators, basically, and we saw a little bit of this deck with the Dynacharge Goblin Rally combo that was able to take down, I don't even think it made the top 8 of an Open, but it certainly was around in the side events at Opens, and I had heard of it, and I'd wanted to do a deck tech on it. This is just the next evolution of that deck.
Absolutely.
And so your token creators are Young Pyromancer and Krenko's Command, and you have several ways to take advantage of those token creators. You can either take advantage of them before they come into play with Foundry Street Denizen, which is a card that not a lot of people are expecting, I imagine.
Well, it's your 12th 1-drop, which is a big deal when most mono-red decks really rely on starting the game with a 1-drop creature in play.
Absolutely, and Foundry Street Denizen's at its best in this deck. Not only do you have the Krenko's Command to pump out 2 bodies on turn 2, but you also have Burning Tree Emissary, which almost always will be able to pump out 2 red creatures as well.
Right.
Because you've got Rakdos Cackler, Stromkirk Noble, Young Pyromancer, and Fire Fist Striker. So speaking of Fire Fist Striker, there's a new interaction with M14 that's Fire Fist Striker plus Mutavault.
Right.
It's very important in the new red decks, all of them basically, but especially in this one.
Absolutely. Especially in decks like Jund, where they rely on casting a really important creature, an Olivia, a Thragtusk, whatever, and you need to get through that last 6 to 8 points of damage. Fire Fist Striker is what lets you do it.
Sure. And so the ways that you can also take advantage of all these tokens, we have Hellrider, we have Dynacharge, as we mentioned before, a card that's very similar to Trumpet Blast, but certainly better at instant speed and much less expected than any Trumpet Blast in Limited might be.
And certainly, even just for 1 mana, you get +2/+0 for a creature that's getting through. You can create a token that gives an additional power to Foundry Street Denizen.
Yep.
It can operate almost as a giant growth.
Yeah, and you can also turn one of your 1/1s into a 3/1 to be able to trade with a Thragtusk in a pinch.
Right.
And the last one you have as a 1/of is Weapon Surge.
Yeah.
Very good against the Naya Blitz and other 2/2s in the format, I
Right.
imagine.
They just line up their lethal blocks, and you kill all of their creatures and keep all of yours.
Right. And the last spell you have in the deck is Pillar of Flame.
Yeah.
Now, we were talking before we were on camera that this deck has much less elimination spell count than any other red deck in recent memory. And you were saying that it's basically a white weenie deck.
Right.
And Pillar of Flame serves as the Path to Exile, Journey to Nowhere role of the 4 or even less elimination spell to be able to get stuff through.
It plays much more like a white weenie deck in that what you're usually used to with mono-red decks is being able to attack them down to 6 or 8 and then finish them with Morbid Brimstone Volley or Searing Spear, and this deck really can't do that. Its way to kill people involves having creatures on the board, and so you can make far fewer suicide attacks. You're going to end up not attacking in a lot of combat steps so that you can set up a lethal Dynacharge, whereas in a more conventional mono-red deck, you would be attacking with everyone on every turn, just trying to force through damage before they overwhelm you. The really important part about this format with all of its great mid-range creatures is that you have to keep going toe-to-toe with their board or you're going to lose. And this is a mono-red deck that can do that where very few mono-red decks other than this can.
So, looking briefly at the sideboard, you have a sideboard plan that is, I've seen around the room in a couple of different types of mono-red decks, and it's sort of counterintuitive when you first think about it. It's your mono-red deck needs more lands after sideboard to be able to cast Burning Earth reliably on turn 4. Burning Earth being one of the best ways to punish Jund, Blue, White, Red, all of these mid-range decks. But you don't want to sideboard mountains, so you actually bring in more non-basic lands.
Right.
You just bring in extra Mutavaults.
Your free 2/2 attacker that gives you more ways to cast your expensive spells, gives you ways to cast 2 spells in a turn, which is really important with Young Pyromancer. It also lets you cast your sideboard cards, which are on average a bit above the curve from your main deck.
Right, things like Burning Earth, Mizium Mortars, even with Overload, but even just Mizium Mortars by itself, and Mark of Mutiny is the last one. In this deck, not using Active Treatment or Mark of Mutiny like you have recently seen in Aristocrats to be able to steal the best threat and sacrifice it. Here, you want the +1/+1 counter just to deal the extra damage.
Absolutely.
When you give it back to them. Because you're going to have to give it back to them unless they've scooped up their cards.
Right.
So, you're undefeated so far with this deck. Is there anything you wish you had in here that you don't currently, or is there anything you'd change so far?
I'm really happy with how it's working.
Excellent, yeah, and a lot of people were looking for the Young Pyromancer deck, I think, before this tournament. Did it have blue cards, things like Think Twice, be able to get value? Was it a combo deck with something like Burn at the Stake and Battle Him? Or is it just something that uses the tokens as more damage, which I think is exactly what you've done here, and this looks like a ton of fun. And all the best of luck going forward in this tournament. Maybe you'll get back-to-back top 8s.
I sure hope so.
Yeah, there you go. Well, from the sideboard, I'm Ruben Bresley. This was Drew Levin here at Star City Games Richmond.